Gilda Radner.
Hi, this is Dana Carvey.
Sherry O'Teary.
Bill Hader.
Taron Killam.
Jason Sudeikis.
Kristen Wiig.
Cecily Strong.
I'm Andy Samberg.
No matter how talented you are or how iconic you might become, if you want to be part of the cast of Saturday Night Live, you're going to have to audition first.
These are a few of the things I'd like to do on Saturday Night Live.
But while it goes without saying that landing a spot on the most iconic sketch comedy show in history won't be easy, most people don't realize exactly how awkward and tense the process really is.
I'm not sure. I'm Amy Poehler, and I'm here today to talk about something I know quite a bit about.
I'm so nervous.
So whether you're just curious to know or you think your destiny is on the stage of Studio 8H, you might want to pay attention.
I was so nervous.
So nervous.
My first audition, I threw up.
Saturday Night Live debuted on NBC in 1975 and quickly made icons out of its original cast, which included folks like Chevy Chase, John Belushi, and Gilda Radner.
Live from New York, it's Saturday night!
And for SNL's first 5 seasons, their faces and personalities would greatly define the show. In fact, while it's weird to think about now, at the time it wasn't entirely clear that SNL would be able to continue once the original cast was all gone.
No problem.
The world would find out after season 5 when both the last of the not ready for primetime players and executive producer Lorne Michaels departed. And if you've ever seen our video about how one failed season almost canceled Saturday Night Live, you know things didn't go so hot. And also know that in 1986, Michaels returned and rebuilt the cast pretty much from scratch. It's a quality that kept the show fresh and made it a launchpad for many of the most iconic comic performers of the past 50 years. SNL has minted movie stars like Bill Murray and Will Ferrell, TV stars like Amy Poehler and Bill Hader, and even late-night hosts like Jimmy Fallon and Seth Meyers. So, as you might imagine, at one point or another, pretty much everyone in comedy dreams about getting to work on the series. To do that though, you need to audition. And to audition, you have to be invited, which means that first, you have to get them to notice you. And getting noticed isn't easy, but there are a number of ways you might come to the attention of the Saturday Night Live producers. For example, through one of the show's talent scouts. According to Marcy Klein, who worked as a talent scout for the series,
I got to kind of know the stand-ups and go to comedy clubs. I was in the scene.
But the competition isn't by any means limited to stand-ups. Comedy improv troupes like the Groundlings have famously served as stepping stones to the SNL cast as well. At the same time, you should never underestimate the power of a good old-fashioned celebrity endorsement.
Lorne always said, let's get people through recommendations of cast members and writers. Andy Samberg on the show because Jimmy Fallon recommended him.
George Wendt called me about Jason Sudeikis.
I mean, when it comes down to it, I think Tina got me the job.
Invites are usually issued prior to the start of a new season, but if the producers think the show is missing something, they can go out during a season as well. Kate McKinnon, for example, was brought in to audition fairly late to the show's 38th season. But regardless of when you get the call, the process always works pretty much the same. Auditions take place at NBC's headquarters at 30 Rockefeller Plaza in New York City, and when you arrive, you'll be taken to a dressing room where you get yourself ready. That dressing room is within earshot of the stage. If that sounds like it might be intimidating, well, it is.
They put you in the dressing rooms, and I could hear them, their auditions, and I was going, oh, shit, you know? And they were really good.
Then when they're ready to see you, you're sent out onto the real-life set of the show, the exact same one you've seen on TV for decades.
And then we turned the corner and I saw the set and I was just like, holy shit.
But unlike on TV, the show won't be filled with a live audience who showed up to laugh and enjoy the show. On the contrary, there are usually just 2 or 3 people out there watching you. One of those people is almost always SNL overlord Lorne Michaels. But of course, you won't know exactly who's watching because during auditions, the audience is completely blacked out. That means the auditionee can't see the judges at all and has absolutely no way to gauge how they're doing by reading their expressions or body language. Those judges are also notorious for staying silent during auditions. So even if they think you're hilarious, there's a good chance you won't hear so much as a chortle from them.
I remember starting off a character and the audience was not laughing. It was like crickets. And I was like, oh God, I'm tanking.
Nonetheless, you have to go out there and give it your all. The typical audition lasts for just 5 minutes, and in that time, you can do whatever you want. That includes doing impressions, performing original characters, or even doing stand-up material. But whatever you do, if you want to make the show, you have to be funny. Obviously, there's no formula for doing that, but according to people who have been a part of the process,
What does well in our show is somebody that's really funny in a way that you haven't seen, or that you have seen, but they do it differently. When you see it, you know it.
if you can do that, you just might find yourself being invited to join the cast. In fact, you might even find some of your audition material going out on the air. Will Ferrell, for example, performed an early version of his now famous Get Off the Shed sketch for his audition.
Who wants a burger? These are just about done here. Get off the goddamn shed!
And it went over so well, it became the first sketch he appeared in during his debut performance.
I will punch you in the face if you don't get off the shed! Now get off the shed!
Similarly, Kristen Wiig auditioned for a slew of original characters, and every single one of which was eventually used on the show.
Right now we're having a sale on all of our holiday candles. God, I hope someone walks up soon so I can say welcome to Target. I just want to say welcome to Target to somebody. Welcome to Target!
Of course, not everyone does quite so well. In fact, some of the most talented comedic performers in history never even made it past the audition phase. It's a sobering reminder of how tough the process is, but also a reassuring sign that just because you aren't picked by the SNL judges, that doesn't mean your career is over. Those that wash out may even be invited to re-audition. Current SNL superstar Bowen Yang, for example, had to audition 4 times before he made the cut.
My 4th screen test, I was like, I've done this enough times now, I don't think I'm that nervous anymore. Like, by the 4th time, I was just like, oh, this is just another day at the office.
Many hopefuls have also found themselves initially being offered positions as writers rather than performers. Those writers might someday make their way over to the performing side of things, as was the case with Jason Sudeikis. And if you saw our video about how Tim Robinson failed forward after SNL, you already know that on very rare occasions, the reverse can happen as well.
Not believe this! You are making a big mistake! You guys stink, and this network is a dump!
If they do like your audition, however, the next thing that happens is that you get a meeting with Lorne. That meeting might be brief, and it could even be over the phone, but it's important because if you don't get that meeting, it means you're not getting hired. Now, once you are hired, you'll undergo an orientation and be assigned an office, which will probably make it feel like you've made it. After all, you've been admitted into one of the most exclusive clubs in comedy, which is why SNL cast members tend to share a mutual, we all went through this kind of attitude about the auditioning process.
Seth Meyers said, congratulations, you'll never talk about anything else for the rest of your life. It's completely true.
But in reality, it's just the beginning of a new audition process during which you'll find yourself fighting to get your material on the air.
There's a little bit of a feeling of like, I know what you're going through and what it's like to have to reinvent yourself every Monday.
Auditioning for Saturday Night Live is a high-stress, high-stakes experience. But of course, so is creating and performing on the world's most watched sketch comedy show every week. That's why no other show that we know of finds its cast in such a fashion, and why the audition process is such a big part of the legacy that Lorne has established for the show. Its unforgiving nature churns out the funniest of the funniest and goes a long way toward explaining why Lorne seems to have an eye for comedic talent unlike any other TV producer.
This is my brother right here, Dave Tesh.
I did not know that you had a brother.
Oh yeah, you know, he's not just my brother, he's also the genius in the family.
Meanwhile, I'm blushing.
When Saturday Night Live debuted in 1975, its boundary-pushing cast was collectively known as the Not Ready for Primetime Players. And in the 5 decades since, the series has continued to be a platform for fresh comedic voices. But every once in a while, it casts a comic who's not even ready for late night, much less primetime.
There's no basis for these boos.
This was arguably the case in 2012 when Tim Robinson made his debut on the show as a featured performer. It wouldn't go exactly how he had hoped, but absurd as it seems, he was about to fail his way to stardom.
You take this one alone, Johnny.
Well, what about you?
Don't you worry about me! This isn't the last you're gonna hear of old Dave Tesh!
If you are a fan of absurdist humor, then you are no doubt aware of the hit Netflix series, I Think You Should Leave with Tim Robinson. And if you're not a fan of absurdist humor, then you'll probably at least recognize it as the source of this now ubiquitous internet meme. Debuting in April of 2019, I Think You Should Leave is a comedy sketch show that leans heavily into cringe humor and the surreal, making it a part of the same comic niche that includes other offbeat series like Tim and Eric, Awesome Show, Great Job, and The Eric Andre Show. And like those, it has become wildly popular popular with both fans and critics, turning its titular star into what seems like an overnight success. But as longtime fans of Saturday Night Live already know, Robinson didn't exactly appear out of nowhere. Tim Robinson was raised in and around Detroit, Michigan. After seeing a performance by the improvisational theater troupe Second City as a teenager, he signed up for weekly improv classes, later graduating to its world-famous main stage in Chicago. During his time with Second City, Robinson would become something of a fixture in the Chicago improv scene, and in 2011, he would land a regular role in the CBS sitcom Friend Me, which starred Christopher Mintz-Plasse. Despite earning a full series order, the show would never air due to the tragic death of its creator. That was undoubtedly a tough break, but Robinson was about to fail forward for the first time, because a potentially much bigger and better opportunity was right around the corner. That opportunity came because Second City is famous for being an unofficial training program for Saturday Night Live. The vaunted comedy sketch show has drawn an inordinate number of its cast members from the program. Robinson would also be drafted by SNL in 2012. Over the course of that season, Robinson would appear in a few memorable sketches like Z-Shirts and Round Ball Rock, while also delivering a serviceable impression of former Pittsburgh Steelers head coach Bill Cowher. But the differences between working on stage and working on live TV turned out to be much more significant than he expected. Overwhelmed by his role, he failed to make much of a mark as a performer, and the following season, he was dropped from the cast.
I cannot believe this.
You are making a big mistake. You guys stink, and this network is a dump.
He was not, however, dropped from the show entirely. Instead, producer Lorne Michaels offered Robinson the chance to complete the last 3 years of his contract as one of the series' full-time writers. It was a rare move, only having occurred once before in SNL's history, when Brian Doyle Murray departed the cast for the writer's room in 1980. And as one might imagine, Robinson was less than thrilled about the whole thing. In his own words, "The first year was really hard, and it shook my confidence. The most anything's ever shaken my confidence in comedy. I felt lost." Nonetheless, Robinson resolved to work hard in his new position, and he would spend the next 3 seasons in the writer's room, an experience that turned out to have some unexpected upsides. Since he would no longer be performing his skits himself, he became less worried about whether or not they bombed. That, in turn, encouraged him to get more creative with his writing. Of course, while SNL can occasionally veer into the bizarre, its comedy is generally written to play to a wide audience, and a number of Robinson's ideas were rejected for being too absurd. SNL doesn't typically reveal the writing credits for individual sketches, so we can't say for sure which ones he did contribute to, but it was during this stretch of his career that he learned how to channel his more eccentric impulses into a more television-friendly form. At the same time, he also began working on his skills as a television performer by making appearances on more Absurdist shows. It probably wasn't the path he saw for himself when he first signed on as an SNL cast member, but Robinson would ultimately come to see his time working on the show as a confidence booster that helped hone his writing and producing skills.
To every week have that show to like challenge yourself and push yourself to try and make a room full of people who have seen every comedy move on the planet laugh was so fun for me, and it gave me confidence because I got to do that every week, and I made some of my best friends, and I really loved it there.
The SNL writer's room is also where he would meet his future writing partner, Zach Cannon. The two hit it off pretty quickly because, according to Robinson, we just have a very similar sensibility, and we're completely aligned on what we think is funny. Perhaps that's why in 2016, after SNL season 41 came to a close and Robinson's contract expired, they went to work on their own show. Created by the duo along with Sam Richardson and Joe Kelly, and co-produced by Lorne Michaels and SNL star Jason Sudeikis, Detroiters would debut on Comedy Central in February of 2017. The series starred Robinson and Richardson as a pair of dim-witted best friends trying to run a small Detroit advertising agency. It was celebrated by critics for its unique balance of purposefully dopey humor and surprisingly soulful character work. The show ultimately did well enough to earn a second season, but not a third. Detroiters wasn't a huge hit, but it did lay the stylistic groundwork for what came next.
Stop! 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 Please let me go! Please let me go first! I'm doing something!
I Think You Should Leave. The series is produced in conjunction with Lonely Island members Andy Samberg, Akiva Schaffer, and Jorma Taccone, who Robinson credits with helping find the show's tone and comedic rhythms. The roughly 15-minute installments generally get their laughs at the expense of obstinate characters who refuse to admit when they're wrong, to increasingly wacky results. It's a theme which naturally emerged from the sketches Robinson and Cannon wrote together. Robinson's now famous hot dog suit guy, who refuses to admit he's the owner of a hot dog-shaped car that crashed into a clothing store, is a prime example of the cringe-inducingly stubborn crackpots the show traffics in.
Find out whoever did this and punish him ourselves. Maybe take his bare butt out of his costume and spank him. Maybe you could do it, sir.
Not gonna happen.
Okay, you.
No.
But he's just one of many. Other such weirdos include a man inappropriately taking advantage of the liberal swearing policy on an adults-only ghost tour, a confused bass player who thinks his frontman needs help improvising lyrics to a new song, and a television spokesman trying to save his network from being dropped by a cable provider for showing hundreds of naked dead bodies in their programming.
I didn't do f***ing shit. I didn't rig shit. I've been waiting a long time for a hit on Corncob TV. I didn't f***ing do this!
Each character is stranger and more awkward than the last, yet they all somehow manage to retain a very sympathetic and relatable humanity.
You're saying we're allowed to swear. I'm saying big fat load of and horse and you're getting mad.
Many of those characters are performed by Robinson himself, but the show has also proven to be an ideal showcase for guest stars. Some more notable guests have included Tim Heidecker, Bob Odenkirk, Cicely Strong, and Will Forte, who made a particularly memorable appearance as an airline passenger seeking revenge against the now adult baby who cried through his flight decades earlier. It's the kind of absurd comedy that Robinson has always worked to create. In fact, according to the man himself, at least some of the sketches were originally written for SNL, but proved too out there for the iconic series.
It was so great to, things that didn't work on SNL, or like, it was so nice to be able to bring it back and be like, okay, it is okay. And I am okay.
He also credits Netflix, who he had previously worked with on the 2016 sketch comedy show The Characters, for supporting his strange sensibilities so completely that even he was shocked. And it's no wonder why they have. I Think You Should Leave has penetrated the cultural consciousness in a way few comedy sketch shows have ever achieved. That success has already resulted in 3 hit seasons, and according to Robinson, although it hasn't been officially renewed as of this writing, a 4th is likely.
I'm not worried about it! I'm not worried about any of this!
And ironically, if he had immediately succeeded as a performer on SNL, none of it might have happened. Over the past half a century, quite a few of SNL's more popular and immediately successful alumni have had a lot less luck breaking away from the show and establishing their own brands. But Robinson's failure as a cast member encouraged him to sharpen his talents as a writer and performer, lean harder into his own comedic sensibilities, and left him free to define himself to the audience in his own completely absurd terms.
Free boat ride for 3. Now, who should I take? Keeve? Yes. And T-Pain.
This was genuinely important. Thanks to the unrelenting march of time, the uninitiated see this skit and the subsequent song as nothing special. They might not even find it all that funny, but Lonely Island's I'm on a Boat and the rest of the group's repertoire righted SNL's sinking ship and single-handedly kept it afloat in turbulent cultural waters. That sounds like a bold claim to make in favor of a guy who put his dick in a box, but just hear us out.
Gentlemen, what do you have for us today?
In 1995, after 20 years on the air, Saturday Night Live was staring down the possibility of cancellation. The 94-95 season was universally panned and is still thought of as one of the worst in the show's history. If you've subjected yourself to any of season 20, then it's not hard to see why.
Well, there it is. I think it's... Bob, what do I want to say?
NBC was demanding change, and over the next few seasons, SNL's creator Lorne Michaels did what he could to appease them. With the budget at the forefront of his mind, he shrunk the cast, swapped band leaders, writers, and just generally tried to keep his head down. Astonishingly, it worked. At least for a little while. In 2001, the show's overall direction would be altered for years to come after the events of September 11th. With heavy-hitting political topics becoming a much more sensitive issue, the cast pivoted to pop culture and only lobbed softballs at current events when they absolutely had to. So when the 2004 presidential election rolled around, their toothless coverage of both candidates showed viewers once and for all that SNL had lost its edge.
Now, I don't know how many of these internets are carrying these rumors, but they're just wrong.
Without a willingness to push boundaries, the once revolutionary sketch comedy show was slipping from the cultural consciousness. Not only was it not funny, but it had lost relevance. And just when SNL was at its weakest, it also had to contend with a new threat to its existence. The early internet was gaining traction. Loyal viewers were turning away from their TV screens to focus on their computer screens instead, and a new flavor of humor was being nurtured there. The attitude of these early 2000s online spaces was charmingly contradictory. It was equal parts sardonic and sincere. It was experimental and familiar, but most of all, it was really, really stupid. Most people didn't understand what was happening on those chat forums and personal GeoCities pages, but an entire generation was going to be defined by it, and anyone who wanted to be a part of the future had to get in on the ground floor. Akiva Schaffer, Jorma Taccone, and Andy Samberg understood this. The three recent college grads were living in LA and looking for a way into the entertainment industry. Together, they created a website called Lonely Island, which they had also self-deprecatingly called the apartment they shared. The Lonely Island website hosted the trio's video skits, and those skits eventually got the attention of Jimmy Fallon. Yeah, Lonely Island wasn't immediately scooped up by SNL. Lorne Michaels only caught wind of their comedic talent after Fallon hired them for a writing gig on the 2005 MTV Movie Awards.
What?
Now.
Tom?
Originally, Samberg was the only one brought onto the show as a cast member, but after Michaels finally watched a few of the group's videos, he stuck Schaffer and Taccone in the writer's room, and Lonely Island was officially reunited. Unfortunately, they didn't exactly thrive in SNL's more traditional environment. Most of their sketches never made it to air. Their sense of humor just didn't fit the show's established patterns, so Schaffer and Taccone went back to what they knew best: online video. SNL's very first pre-recorded digital short was directed by Schaffer, written by Will Forte, and starred Forte and Samberg. It's hard to find nowadays, but it was uploaded directly to NBC's website on December 3rd, 2005. The short, titled Lettuce, saw Forte and Samberg sitting on a stoop talking about the loss of a mutual friend while chomping down on whole heads of lettuce. We told you the early internet was stupid, right?
I don't know what to say. Sometimes you don't need to say anything.
This was a huge change in direction for the show. It was Saturday Night Live, after all, and these shorts were pre-recorded and being put online in an age when internet video was still new and seen as a lesser form of entertainment by most of the general public. It's impossible to know how many people watched the short, but SNL saw enough promise in the concept to move forward with it. Coincidentally, a new video sharing website popped up on the World Wide Web just 2 weeks later, and Lonely Island, being the tech-savvy internet users they were, uploaded their next SNL short onto the burgeoning platform just 2 days after it went live. Obviously, that platform was YouTube, and the short was their song Lazy Sunday. Written by all three members of Lonely Island as well as Chris Parnell, Lazy Sunday was an immediate and unparalleled success in terms of viral videos, pulling in more than 7 million views in just a few days. The video grabbed the attention of the younger generation in a way that none of SNL's more traditional sketches had in years. Not only that, but it drew huge numbers of people to YouTube, years before social media and easy link sharing were commonplace, and so the two grew symbiotically and meteorically. Suddenly, SNL was on the radar of millions of teens and college kids again, and it was all thanks to Lonely Island and their comfortability with the weird landscape of internet culture. Viewers didn't need the show to be politically scathing or even particularly witty. These shorts were nonsense, and that's what made them great. Their popularity and influence quickly outgrew the confines of YouTube's video player, and in 2007, Samberg, Taccone, and a whole host of SNL mainstays starred in the movie Hot Rod, which followed an amateur stuntman trying to raise money for his stepfather's heart surgery. The film bombed in the box office, but has since garnered a cult following thanks to the absurd humor Lonely Island has become known for.
Cool beans. Cool beans.
Of course, the world and the internet move fast, and Lonely Island had to move too. Shoving lettuce in your face was no longer enough to keep the content-hungry masses entertained, so the group evolved, and they got lewd. In the late 2000s and into the 2010s, Lonely Island put out a number of raunchy songs and music videos. Perhaps none of these is more renowned than 2009's Stuck in a Box, which went on to win a Primetime Emmy for Outstanding Original Music and Lyrics. And in case you haven't heard that song in a while, it's important to remember that there's a whole section that gives you step-by-step instructions on how to put your junk in that box. Just a decade before, there was no way something like that was going to win an Emmy, but Lonely Island pulled it off. While they officially retired from SNL in 2012, they've remained part of the zeitgeist. In 2016, they came out with Pop Star, a mockumentary of the music industry that shone on a spotlight on all Lonely Island's best characteristics. And they've returned to SNL a handful of times over the years to grace the show with a new shot of relevancy. The most recent of those returns as of writing this script was back in November of 2024, with their new song Here I Go. The song features Charlie XCX, who's one of the biggest pop stars in the world right now, but something's a little off. Here I Go is every bit as dumb, funny and crass as you'd expect it to be. It even hits on a relevant social issue in a familiar parodic way, and yet it hasn't managed to take off the way their earlier material did. So what's up? Well, the internet is a much bigger and more complex place than it was in the 2000s. Today, a lot of us spend more time online than we do offline, and while the humor is still largely contradictory and stupid, the way we consume and engage with it has changed. Lonely Island isn't made up of a bunch of college grads anymore. Andy Samberg is 46 years old. He and the rest of the group just aren't as in tune with online culture as they were 2 decades ago. And the content they're used to creating is frankly outdated. Injecting a famous pop star like Charlie into the mix doesn't fix the problem, but it also doesn't change the facts. Lonely Island made huge strides in bringing internet humor to the mainstream, and they did it by bringing the mainstream to the internet. They helped make YouTube what it is today. They eased SNL into a new digital era, and without them, there's no telling whether the show would even still be on the air.
Here's you, here's Matt, there's you, there.
This is Saturday Night Live, and it has a reputation for being hit and miss. When SNL misses, it isn't always because the cast is just having an off night. The writing process of Saturday Night Live is largely centered around whomever is hosting. They work alongside the writers to deliver content that is reflective of who they are. This is great when someone like John Mulaney or a comedic-minded actor like Tom Hanks host the show, but when a host is selected that doesn't really have comedic chops, things get a little weird. This is exactly what happened in 1991 when Steven Seagal hosted the show.
I hope you'll forgive me for being a little bit serious, but it's important to me to let you know that there's a lot more to Steven Seagal in the martial arts.
Saturday Night Live is America's longest-running sketch comedy series. It began production in 1975 and has been a proving ground for some of the funniest people in the world. Legendary names like Bill Murray, Eddie Murphy, Tina Fey, Kristen Wiig, and Will Ferrell, among a laundry list of others, all got their start screaming,
Live from New York!
It's Saturday night!
In 1991, Saturday Night Live was at the top of its game. The cast was filled with not only talent, but outright comedy legends. Chris Farley, Mike Myers, Chris Rock, Dana Carvey, Phil Hartman rounded out the performing cast, while the writer's room was filled with names like Conan O'Brien, Bob Odenkirk, and Robert Smigel. It was truly a renaissance era for the show, and audiences were tuning in en masses to watch the hilarious antics and colorful characters created by the ensemble.
Making copies, the McStingster, Stingatola, Sting.
Also reaching the top of his game was rising action star Steven Seagal, who is currently on track to rival Arnold Schwarzenegger and Sylvester Stallone at the box office with hits like Marked for Death and Out for Justice. Saturday Night Live is constantly on the lookout for rising stars to host their shows. It's what drives their ratings. They look for notable people of fame from almost every realm imaginable. This is all part of what piques the audience's interest and generates ratings for the show. Political candidates like Al Gore and John McCain, sports stars like Charles Barkley and Lance Armstrong, even public figures like Howard Cosell and Steve Forbes have all hosted the show to varying degrees of success. In 1991, Steven Seagal was rapidly gaining a reputation for being a box office draw, so, of course, it made sense for Saturday Night Live to invite him to host. This turned out to be a colossal mistake.
Man, your daughter sure does take her time.
What? Does that bother you?
No.
On Saturday Night Live, the host is completely enmeshed with the creative process every step of the way. Writers work tirelessly to pitch their sketches and ideas in hopes of getting them onto the show. It's an incredibly competitive process, as some of the writers are trying to become performers themselves, or at the very least, advance their careers as comedy writers. The quota varies, but basically, each writer is required to pitch dozens of ideas to the host and cast. The host then decides which sketches are best suited for them, and those are the sketches that end up on the show. From that point on, the host works with the writers and cast leading up to the dress rehearsals and inevitable airing of the show. Sometimes this creative process works incredibly well. Sometimes great SNL hosts can even feel like they're part of the ensemble. Steve Martin has been invited back to host so many times, most people have no idea that he was never even a cast member.
We are two wild and crazy guys.
Many celebrities have had such a positive experience working on SNL that they have created reoccurring characters for themselves and have even received best of DVD compilations. However, when a host shows up that doesn't understand comedy, the show can feel a little too flat. Or when they have a young host with a carefully manicured career trajectory, the show ends up playing things a little too safe. The end result is that these episodes can feel boring and lackluster in comparison to others. The Steven Seagal episode was a disaster for the entire Saturday Night Live creative process. From start to finish, Steven Seagal was a hindrance to pretty much everyone he came into contact with. One of the main reasons for this is that Steven Seagal had never even seen an episode of SNL before arriving to host the show. During the writing process, he would pitch extremely problematic and insane ideas. David Spade recounted in an interview that this was actually the first time in his career that SNL thought about replacing the host in favor of just doing an all-cast show. Julia Sweeney said that one of Seagal's ideas involved a sexual assault survivor getting sexually assaulted by their therapist. Tim Meadows described the creative process of working with Seagal quite concisely when he said, "You can't explain something to someone in German if they don't speak German. When the person you are writing material for cannot comprehend what you're going for, you have to boil things down until you come up with something that they can actually follow." In the case of Steven Seagal, the only thing he understood was his pseudo-tough guy persona.
Oh, I know what you're thinking. Mine's bigger than yours, right? It's not fair. Throw it away.
And a smattering of abrupt violence, and this episode is a direct reflection of that. The cold open features Hans and Franz, played by Dana Carvey and Kevin Nealon, respectively. The sketch seems like it would be a home run with the involvement of Steven Seagal, playing against their obsession with Arnold Schwarzenegger. However, unlike many successful performers, Seagal just refused to poke fun at himself. Bob Odenkirk recently recounted in an interview with Howard Stern that he demanded to beat up Hans and Franz if the sketch was going to air.
He goes, "If I do it, I have to beat them up."
Dana Carvey said that they actually had to stop rehearsal for the sketch because Steven Seagal was upset that he couldn't beat up Arnold Schwarzenegger in real life. His opening monologue wasn't even a monologue. He just sort of talk-sings his way through Carl Douglas's kung fu fighting with Chris Rock and Tim Meadows singing backup for him. From that point on, every sketch involves Steven Seagal taking himself way too seriously, and almost all of them involve violence. Throughout the entire process, Steven Seagal would complain about jokes that didn't make sense to him, and refuse to take part in anything that came remotely close to satirizing who he was. Many of the cast members said that Seagal just didn't want to be there. Even beloved characters like the Richmeister wasn't safe from Steven Seagal's assault on the comedic arts. Instead of playing along with the actual premise of the sketch, Seagal just abruptly begins beating up Rob Schneider and hanging him out of the window for seemingly no reason whatsoever. The final sketch of this infamous episode of Saturday Night Live isn't even really a sketch. It's just Steven Seagal fighting ExxonMobil executives, the majority of whom weren't even played by cast members. SNL hired stuntmen for Seagal to fight for almost 7 minutes before screaming,
This is what happens when you pollute the planet.
There isn't even a premise to this sketch. It's just a weird lesson about environmentalism told through insanity and hip-tossing people through tables. A good SNL host will have, at the very least, some degree of self-awareness and be able to roll with the playful punches that Saturday Night Live dishes out. Plenty of hosts have prodded themselves during the opening monologue, and even more have created farcical sketches about their own existence. When SNL runs into hosts like these, the content reflects the host's willingness to play with the cast, and the episodes can be pretty funny. Some of the funniest SNL sketches have come from having hosts like Peyton Manning or Wayne Gretzky on the show, and those are two names that are about as far removed from comedy as you can get. When Saturday Night Live is firing on all cylinders, it is a force to be reckoned with. When the hosts, writers, and performers are all working in harmony to deliver the best possible product, there aren't many sketch comedy shows that can contend. But when Saturday Night Live fails, it very rarely falls squarely on the shoulders of the performers and writers. More often than not, it's due to the person who those people are writing and performing with being either unable to grasp the material or being unwilling to play along.
So what's up next for the Dice Man? You got a movie coming out this summer?
No.
Comedy is fun to produce. There's actually a saying in sketch comedy and improv that goes something to the effect of, if you aren't having fun, then you're an Sure, comedy is grueling work that requires laser focus, sleepless nights, and a ton of effort, but at the end of the day, it's very fun to execute. But when you have someone that isn't willing to play along, it doesn't feel like fun anymore. It feels like the comedy itself is sort of marked for death before the show even airs.
I don't want you to talk about anything to me anymore. I don't want you to say my name anymore. You hear me?
Everything's upside down.
Actually, this is a cute story. We met on a golf course in Scotland when we were...
Get off the shed! How about next Sunday, Pebblebrook? 12 o'clock tee-off time.
This was a historic moment for Saturday Night Live, but not in a good way. On September 30th, 1995, Will Ferrell debuted as an SNL cast member. He became a main player and used his newfound fame to propel himself into bona fide movie stardom like so many of his castmates before him. So what's so bad about that? Well, September 30th, 1995 might have marked the beginning of Ferrell's career, but it also denoted the end of an era. It was the last time Saturday Night Live ever produced a movie star.
I drive a Dodge Stratus!
When Lorne Michaels first conceptualized Saturday Night Live for NBC, he envisioned a politically savvy and culturally relevant sketch comedy show that touched on the issues of the day while still standing the test of time. He needed a solid stable of comedians. By the time the show premiered on October 11th, 1975, he had found what he was looking for. The original SNL cast consisted of Chevy Chase, Dan Aykroyd, Garrett Morris, Gilda Radner, Jane Curtin, John Belushi, and Lorraine Newman. They were dubbed the Not Ready for Primetime Players as a direct response to their competition, Saturday Night Live with Howard Cosell, but in a hilarious twist of fate, it was our beloved SNL cast that would really steal the spotlight.
Jorg, my brother, there will certainly be a lot of swinging in our bachelor pad tonight.
The show swiftly cemented itself as an American cultural touchstone, and its cast enjoyed the perks of that status. 2 years in, they even poached one of Howard Cosell's primetime players when Bill Murray joined the team. As it turned out, Murray, Chase, Aykroyd, and Belushi were not only ready for primetime, they were ready for the silver screen. All four actors rose through the ranks as leading men in well-regarded comedies throughout the late 70s, 80s, and even into the 90s. These men weren't just making movies. They were shaping what comedy films could be and morphing into massive celebrities in the process. While John Belushi tragically passed in 1982 and Chevy Chase, Dan Aykroyd, and Bill Murray's movie careers leveled out in the mid-90s, SNL was far from finished when it came to making movie stars. While the popularity of SNL itself waxed and waned over the years, its cast remained popular, beginning with Animal House in 1978 and ending with Tropic Thunder and Step Brothers in 2008. At least one movie starring an SNL cast member could be found near the top of ticket sales or critical reception every year for an astounding 30 years.
Yeah, baby! Yeah.
And it wasn't just full cast members that found fame through SNL. Those who showed up as special guests like Steve Martin and Jim Carrey ended up as hot Hollywood commodities, meaning that even today, the show's legacy stars are still drawing crowds in movie theaters. But the key word there is legacy, because it's been decades since the culturally relevant sketch comedy show actually contributed to relevant culture.
It's been a real drag! Thanks for nothing.
Will Ferrell was the last of the true movie stars to come out of Saturday Night Live in 1995. And with the show celebrating its 50th anniversary in 2025, it's become even more glaring just how much times have changed. If you're viewing the show through nostalgia-tinted lenses, you might be keen to say it's because it just hasn't been good for the last 20 years. But things are a little more complicated than that. Back in the show's heyday, Universal Pictures took a bit of a chance on Saturday Night Live by doing something virtually unheard of. They agreed to finance a movie based on one of the show's most iconic skits, the real-life musical act, The Blues Brothers. The movie hit theaters in 1980 and made $115 million off a budget of just $27 million. This move to the big screen helped to legitimize SNL as an entertainment institution.
They're not gonna catch us. We're on a mission from God.
And since rising tides lift all ships, it also legitimized its cast members' careers. Unfortunately, not all of SNL's subsequent forays into film were quite as successful. While 1992's Wayne's World was another smash hit, the majority of the show's movie catalog failed to make its budget back. 1993's Coneheads, 1994's It's Pat, and 2000's Ladies Man are particular standouts in that shameful arena. Luckily, the cast wasn't restricted to starring exclusively in SNL movies. They were free to pursue other projects, which is what many of them did. The big names in that 30-year-long golden age were relentless in their quest to make audiences laugh, and they helped to bring about a sort of comedy movie renaissance. In some cases, like with Adam Sandler, they practically created their own subgenres based entirely around their name and unique comedic style. The age of the comedy renaissance, however, is long gone. Not so coincidentally, it started to fizzle out in the early 2000s and was effectively over by the mid-2010s. This is the point at which movie studios moved away from mid-budget comedies and simple concepts to focus on films with much grander scopes.
It's bullshit.
And I'm sorry. And I'm not putting down your profession, but it's just the way I feel.
They went with higher risk projects in hopes of seeing higher returns. Both Iron Man and The Dark Knight came out in 2008. They changed the tide of audience expectations, and they started to gravitate to longer, grittier, and more spectacular movies for the price of their ticket. Even the comedies had to be full of complex stunts and action sequences. The SNL actors who had built their careers off of family vacation films, simple spy parodies, and more traditional comedies found themselves homeless in a Hollywood structure they had helped build. And in more recent years, we've only strayed further away from those roots. Taking a look at newer releases, you'd be hard-pressed to find anything resembling the comedies of old between the 10,000th Marvel movie, highbrow horror flick, or fast-paced addition to an established action franchise. This shift in the industry is further proven by the fact that Saturday Night Live hasn't put out its own movie since MacGruber in 2010, which was a total financial bomb. And that's not the only technical glitch in SNL's movie star production line. The birth and popularity of the internet had a significant impact on, well, everything.
Stay off the internet.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Before people could curate their own highly specific online presence, America essentially operated as a monoculture where just about everyone knew the same celebrities and consumed the same entertainment. Nowadays, there are an endless amount of subcultural niches with their own insular fan bases, and hundreds of hours worth of content are being uploaded every second of the day to various platforms. It's no longer a guarantee that your coworkers will have watched the same TV show or gone to see the same movie you did over the weekend. The rise of streaming services meant that prestige television and movies were suddenly available to be paused and played at the viewer's whim. Now we're inundated with high-caliber entertainment, and we don't have to set foot in a movie theater to see it. Even the best and most pervasive media in the new digital age can be quickly consumed on a phone screen.
You think you've seen a film on your telephone. Get real.
Which makes our once larger-than-life stars feel small. There's just too much competition for a potential audience's attention, and that's not to say that Saturday Night Live is dead. Obviously, while many members of the cast aren't movie stars, they have carved their way into respectable careers as writers, producers, voice actors, and television mainstays. Tina Fey and Amy Poehler are the two most obvious examples. Others, like Andy Samberg, have embraced the streaming era and started movies specifically made for online consumption. And in the more modern seasons of SNL, just about every cast member has a podcast or other online presence where their millions of fans can go to support them. So while SNL might not be the star-making factory it once was, it hasn't fallen completely out of favor. Rather, our idea of what a star even is has changed in the 50 years since the show first aired, and the cast's approach to stardom has necessarily changed along with it. Whether that change is a positive one is up to personal interpretation, though it probably wouldn't hurt to start putting out a few mid-budget comedy movies again.
Seriously, you don't understand. This is not for sale.
No, you don't understand, canteen boy. I want that canteen.
This is Adam Sandler, and as far as Saturday Night Live alumni go, he's one of the most successful cast members of all time.
You know, the city's redoing the sidewalks over on River Road. Yeah. Well, I leaned over the guardrails and I wrote in the wet cement, Cheryl Teague has big boobs.
Audiences really connected with Sandler's aggressive yet whimsical approach to sketch comedy, and some of the songs he created during his tenure went on to become chart-topping singles. However, Adam Sandler quickly found himself serving as the canary in the coal mine for one of the most turbulent periods in the show's history. Despite his star seemingly being on the rise, after his 5th season, Adam Sandler was fired from SNL. Saturday Night Live's hiring of Adam Sandler came largely at the request of Dennis Miller, who was at the time serving as Saturday Night Live's lead anchor for Weekend Update, and also head writer of the show. Sandler was having some small successes with roles on The Cosby Show as Theo Huxtable's friend Smitty, and starring in the low-budget feature film Going Overboard alongside Billy Zane and Billy Bob Thornton. Sandler was really focusing on his career as a stand-up comedian at the time, and after Dennis Miller caught one of his sets in Los Angeles, he made the recommendation to Lorne Michaels to bring Sandler on as a writer. In the world of Saturday Night Live, there are a couple different pathways for comedians to take toward becoming a player on the show. Some performers get hired as cast members right out of the gate. There are usually seasoned veterans from the nation's leading comedy theaters. However, some performers get brought in as writers first and eventually work their way into becoming a featured player. Sandler eventually made the cut and worked his way up to becoming a featured player, and was able to instantly connect with home viewing audiences. Adam Sandler's natural way of channeling testosterone-fueled aggression through a childlike silliness really seemed to click with people, and within a year, he became a full-fledged cast member. Sandler was definitely a unique presence on the show, to say the least. Comedy in the 90s was predominantly narrative-based. There wasn't really any precedent set for Adam Sandler's childlike absurdity, and this is how Adam Sandler was able to stand out from the show's primary cast of performers.
You did it! How do you feel? Like I can fly, senor!
However, this irreverent style of comedy can be polarizing, and a shift in ratings could be easy to pin on oddball cast members. In 1995, Saturday Night Live saw the largest ratings drop in the show's history. They estimated it was about a 19% decrease in viewership, and while a decrease in ratings is a very normal thing that happens on SNL, something this large demands immediate action from NBC's top brass. That action is typically a turnover of key staff members and performers. When Saturday Night Live brings on new performers, they typically begin trumpeting their arrival as loudly as possible across every conceivable media outlet and parading them around press conferences like horse shows. This is largely because marketing an all-new cast of performers is an easy way to stir up public interest in the show. Adam Sandler has gone on record to say that he believes that his firing was due to the people at the top of the NBC food chain just not liking the cast and wanting to take the show in a new direction. While NBC has never really spoken out on the issue, it's hard to look at what happened at Saturday Night Live in 1995 without things seeming like there was some sort of personal vendetta going on toward the cast and crew. Adam Sandler and Chris Farley weren't the only casualties of that season. Mike Myers left the show mid-season, presumably to focus on his film career after the success of Wayne's World 1 and 2. Janeane Garofalo left the show after just 4 episodes of being on the cast, citing homophobia and sexism as her reasons for leaving. After Stewart Saves His Family flopped in the box office, Al Franken left the show and went into politics. And these are just the performers who left for definitive reasons. 1995 also saw the dismissal and/or resignation of the following performers: Kevin Nealon, Ellen Cleghorn, Michael McKean, Jay Moore, Chris Elliott, Morwenna Banks, and Tim Meadows. However, Meadows would have his termination reversed and remained a cast member for 7 more seasons. Never in the entirety of SNL's history has a turnover of this magnitude taken place. Some of the cast knew that their time was up at SNL, but some were completely surprised by it. Sandler didn't find out about his termination through traditional means, but rather through an awkward conversation with his manager. During a meeting, Adam Sandler was outlining his plans with his manager, which included what he thought he was going to do on the show. And his manager said something to the effect of, "What if you don't go back next year?" To which Sandler remarked that he still had a lot to do on the show and that he wasn't quite done yet. He also told his manager that he would think about it, to which his manager responded, "I think you've thought about it." When Saturday Night Live dismisses performers, it seldom explains itself. They break things off fast and clean, behind the security of what we can only assume is an ironclad non-disclosure agreement. Saturday Night Live was Adam Sandler's only gig at the time, so he really didn't have an idea of what to do with himself. However, Saturday Night Live has a way of giving, even to the performers that it ends up terminating. While getting let go from Saturday Night Live undoubtedly stung, it opened the doors for Adam Sandler to become one of the most successful cast members to date. His breakout film Billy Madison was largely panned by critics, but it achieved enough cult status to warrant Sandler another leading role with Happy Gilmore, which ended up becoming a colossal success. After that, the ball kept rolling for Adam Sandler.
It's about time.
Hey, it is about time. I mean, I just couldn't get the ball in the hole.
The Wedding Singer and The Waterboy were both released in 1998, just 3 years after Sandler had left Saturday Night Live, and both became the #1 movie in America. To this day, Adam Sandler's films have grossed a little over $3 billion at the box office, making him the highest-earning Saturday Night Live alumni in movie history, if you don't count Robert Downey Jr.
I'm the best.
It's hard to believe, but that's more than Steve Martin, Bill Murray, Will Ferrell, or Kristen Wiig. Sandler has also held roles to a high degree of critical acclaim. His performance in Paul Thomas Anderson's Punch Drunk Love earned the actor a Golden Globe nomination, and his performance in Uncut Gems earned the actor an Independent Spirit Award. These are all things that Adam Sandler addressed when he returned to host Saturday Night Live for the first time in 25 years back on May 4th, 2019, when he played I Was Fired during his opening monologue. Adam Sandler's firing from Saturday Night Live may have come as a bit of a shock to him and his fans back in 1995, but As the saying goes, sometimes when a door closes, a window opens. Adam Sandler was able to turn his firing into a career of making the movies he loves to make and hiring his best friends to work on them with him. While the movies he produces all vary in quality, there is something to be said about what Adam Sandler has accomplished for himself. Isn't this the goal for us all? To be able to do the things we love to do with the people we care about.
Let's get see a double flip!
The journey to get to SNL is a long and arduous climb through this nation's varying proving grounds. Performers work and study tirelessly trying to develop characters, bits, and routines that will land them one of the few coveted spots on SNL's cast. And for many of them, SNL is often the goal. Getting fired from Saturday Night Live could easily be interpreted as being the end of someone's career, but it often isn't. Saturday Night Live granted Adam Sandler enough recognition for someone to take a chance on him by greenlighting Billy Madison.
Now you're all in big trouble.
And he never stopped pushing. Adam Sandler's firing from Saturday Night Live is a testament to the chaotic nature of how Hollywood works. You could be down on your luck in 1995, but in 3 years later, you can go on to star in 2 of the most popular movies in America, cementing yourself as a household name.
I am the smartest man alive! We're not worthy!
We're on a mission from God.
Small cowbell.
Live from New York, it's Saturday night!
This is Saturday Night Live, and it is known for churning out some of the most iconic and funniest characters of all time. Some of these characters became so popular that they would eventually break out and wind up starring in their own feature-length film. And for a while, it felt like this was actually part of the pathway to success for these performers.
Showing.
However, we haven't really seen an SNL breakout character in over a decade. Saturday Night Live is the longest-running sketch comedy program in television history. Produced by Lorne Michaels, SNL began airing in 1975, pulling top-tier talent from various live comedy venues and placing them in a primetime slot on NBC that was previously reserved for reruns of The Johnny Carson Show. It has since become a tentpole for burgeoning comedic talent to showcase their abilities alongside some of the biggest stars from the film, television, and music industry. Since its inception, Saturday Night Live has focused on delivering high-concept sketches that highlight their performers' ability to morph themselves into a caricature of someone else in order to drive the comedy of an individual sketch during the show's 90-minute runtime.
This is the sound a doggy makes. Mr. Connery. Moo.
Saturday Night Live has relied on characters to attract an audience week after week. These characters were initially extremely successful with home viewing audiences. People were tuning in week after week to see if they might get a new installment of their favorite character's sketch. In the beginning, we had the Wild and Crazy Guys, Irving Mameway, Rosanna Dana, and the Lounge Singer. Slowly but surely, these characters were becoming household names. People would quote lines from Saturday Night Live around the office in the same way your least favorite uncle does his Borat impression.
Respect is nice.
Character was truly king at 30 Rockefeller Plaza in New York City. And year after year, an ever-changing roster of comedians would showcase their chops for creating hilarious new personas to keep audiences laughing. When a character hit with home viewing audiences, they seemed to be added to an ongoing rotation of sketches that would show up with great frequency.
And I can see Russia from my house.
The first character to ever recur on Saturday Night Live were the Killer Bees in 1975, led by John Belushi and assorted members of the ensemble. These characters were never intended to be recurring. In fact, NBC wanted to cut them after their appearance in Saturday Night Live's first episode. According to Lorne Michaels, NBC's only note for the pilot episode of SNL was "Cut the Bees." NBC and Lorne Michaels had a tense relationship over the show, primarily due to the studio questioning every single decision that was being made during the show's production. This "Cut the Bees" note irritated Lorne Michaels, so he ended up leaving the bees in the show to send a message to the network about who was actually in charge of the show. From then on, slowly but surely, more and more characters began returning week after week. Bill Murray's Nick the Lounge Singer would serenade audiences with songs about Star Wars. Gilda Radner's Rosanna Dana would provide audiences with very New York perspectives on current events. And on April 22, 1978, John Belushi and Dan Aykroyd debuted 2 characters who would eventually break out into the first ever feature-length film to be based on SNL characters with the Blues Brothers.
Are you the police?
No, ma'am. We're musicians.
By this time, John Belushi had become a big star thanks to his role in the 1978 film Animal House, so greenlighting a film with him at the center of it was
really a no-brainer. John Belushi and Animal House director John Landis both wanted to make a Blues Brothers movie, but there wasn't a script. So Dan Aykroyd, who at this point had never written a screenplay before, wrote down 324 pages worth of story and handed it off to Universal Pictures, who then tasked John Landis with editing the script into something usable. The Blues Brothers ended up becoming a colossal hit, generating over $57 million at the box office in 1980. The success of the Blues Brothers opened a whole realm of possibilities within the world of Saturday Night Live, and it seemed to spark a focus shift within the actual sketches the show was producing. SNL began moving away from purely zany and wild antics and towards the creation of something memorable. The addition of Eddie Murphy in 1980 gave us characters like Velvet Jones and Gumby, but after that, the show sort of went into a lull. Nobody was really jumping out of the screen and grabbing our attention. Not even Robert Downey Jr.'s Suitcase Boy could hold viewers' attention for very long.
I know why whales beach themselves. Spider-Man told me!
This all began to change in the late 80s, early 90s, when SNL brought in a fresh crop of performers to hopefully bring audiences back to Saturday nights. Many members of this generation of the ensemble would go on to stardom. Phil Hartman, Chris Farley, Adam Sandler, and David Spade, among others, were able to transition to successful projects from their SNL heyday. However, none of these performers would reach the heights that Mike Myers and Dana Carvey were able to reach with two original characters who would capture the voice of Generation X in an almost perfect pastiche of rock culture, with Wayne Campbell and Garth Algar. Wayne's World was the second film that SNL greenlit, and it exploded with popularity. The film ended up grossing over $121 million and sent Lorne Michaels on a search to generate similar levels of box office success with some of SNL's other characters. The next SNL breakout film was a vehicle for one of Julius Sweeney's more popular characters with the release of 1994's It's Pat.
Good old androgynous Pat.
This film was a complete and total disaster at the box office, and to this day, It's Pat has only generated a paltry $60,000 in revenue. After that, Lorne Michaels produced a film featuring some radioactive characters from the 1970s with the release of 1992's Coneheads, starring SNL alums Dan Aykroyd and Jane Curtin. This film didn't make an enormous splash at the box office either. 1994's Wayne's World 2 failed to do what its predecessor had done, and ended up flopping. While the film is undoubtedly hysterical, it came off as being a little too absurd and seemed to try a little too hard to pander to the original film's success. It was still successful, it just didn't come anywhere close to making the impact Wayne's World did. Al Franken's Stewart Saves His Family failed, A Night at the Roxbury failed, Superstar failed. SNL then tried to recreate the success of the Blues Brothers with the release of The Blues Brothers 2000, but without John Belushi's portrayal of Jake Blues, this film also failed. The Ladies' Man failed, and despite generating some cult success after its home release, MacGruber initially failed. This was back in 2010, and there hasn't really been an SNL movie released since then. As time went on, Saturday Night Live's entire vibe began to change. The show that was once a seemingly humble platform showcasing amazing and otherwise unknown performers began to feel really glitzy and glamorous. In the 2010s, Saturday Night Live began slowly pivoting away from character-based sketches and leaning more on premise to drive the comedy of their sketches. SNL has slowly shifted its content to deliver on the laughs in an incredibly short amount of time. Modern SNL sketches tend to run about 3 or 4 minutes long, and this is just not enough time to introduce or develop funny characters who feel alive. The characters that do end up making it onto the show now are pretty much one-note weekend update bits that just sort of heighten the same joke 3 or 4 times and then end somewhat abruptly.
It's football season, and if you want to nail your date, you're gonna have to tail some gate, okay?
Sure, there have been a few standouts. Kate McKinnon's Close Encounter character pops up every now and then. Vanessa Bayer and Cicely Strong's porn star characters had a pretty good run as well, but even so, these characters are only popping up 3 or 4 times. It's nowhere near the frequency with which SNL delivered on characters in the years prior. Instead of creating rich and interesting characters for an audience to look forward to returning week after week, they have been forced to generate shorter, easy-to-follow sketches in hopes of creating the next viral internet sensation. The hiring of comedy groups like The Lonely Island, Good Neighbor, and Please Don't Destroy are all indicative of this pivot toward creating content geared toward an online audience. The goal isn't to create a box office film centered around a deep exploration of a comedic character anymore. Instead, there has been a pivot toward creating multiple viral video sensations every single week in hopes of drawing an audience. From the weekend update zingers to the performances of the musical guests, one can't help but think about what we might be missing in our refusal to slow down and explore a little bit before jumping into the next thing.
I never imagined this would be my life, I mean, look at me when I started here. Like, back then, I was just like a skinny kid and no one knew what race I was.
It's not often in life that we encounter a person who actively wants to lose their job. And that's especially true when that job represents the fulfillment of that person's lifelong dream and comes with a near guarantee of wealth and fame. But while it's hard to imagine, it does happen. Take, for example, Pete Davidson, a comedian and actor who made it all the way to the pinnacle of his profession, the cast of NBC's Saturday Night Live, and then, after just one season, went to Lorne Michaels and asked to be fired.
So are you officially leaving?
Yeah, man, Lauren accidentally gifted me a sock, so I'm free.
Pete Davidson was born in Staten Island, New York on November 16, 1993, and his first brush with showbiz came at the age of 16 when a group of friends who knew he dreamed of being a comedian pushed him into performing at an open mic night at a local bowling alley. He made his first television appearance on the MTV comedy series Philosophy in 2013 and performed his first televised stand-up routine later that same year on the Comedy Central showcase Gotham Comedy Live. Thanks to that early start, Davidson was an experienced stand-up by the age of 20, and that in turn led to acting jobs on popular shows like Brooklyn Nine-Nine, as well as a bit part in the Judd Apatow-directed comedy Trainwreck in 2014. And it was on the set of the latter that Davidson caught the eye of SNL star Bill Hader, who recommended him to Lorne Michaels as a potential Saturday Night Live cast member. Davidson auditioned with his stand-up routine and was such a hit with the producers, Michaels immediately called Hader to let him know Davidson made the cut.
20-year-olds have sex like Green Day. It's basically the same every time for like a minute and 52 seconds.
So on September 27, 2014, at just 20 years old, Pete Davidson made his debut on the stage of Studio 8H, in the process becoming the first SNL cast member to be born in the 1990s. Davidson's first episode was the premiere of the show's 40th season, and it was something of a transitional time for the iconic series. The producers were making a concentrated effort to appeal to younger audiences, and Davidson's hiring was a part of that effort. During his first appearance on Weekend Update, he's even humorously introduced by Michael Shea as our resident young person. But despite his youth and the fairly limited screen time he received in his first season, Davidson still managed to leave an impression on the show's fanbase. That first appearance on Weekend Update, for example, would find Davidson appearing as a commentator on a story about a teenager who took pictures of himself performing sexual acts on a statue of Jesus. The ensuing commentary was so memorable, Entertainment Weekly named Davidson as the new cast member who made the biggest first impression. The reviewer, in all fairness, was not entirely comfortable with the bit, but still noted that, if nothing else, it demonstrated that the comedian can capture an audience's attention with ease.
If you don't go down on a guy for $1 million, you obviously don't care about your family.
A few months later, he appeared in the popular sketch Escape from Jungle Island, an Indiana Jones parody that found Davidson and The Rock playing adventurers who have to suck poison from each other's wounds, while Kate McKinnon's explorer character enviously looks on. That sketch became what is now arguably Davidson's most popular from his first season, and his future on SNL looks pretty promising. At least, it did from the outside.
Got a kid?
What? No, I'm a virgin.
Why do you have a diaper bag?
But behind the scenes, Davidson himself felt very differently about how that freshman season was going. In fact, according to the man himself, after my first year, I actually called for a meeting with Lorne. I was like, please fire me. In the Peacock documentary, SNL 50 Beyond Saturday Night Live, Davidson would even recall telling the legendary showrunner, I don't belong here. Everybody here is so talented and they don't want to be my friend. If that strikes you as a little childish, well, Davidson would eventually come to feel the same, saying of the complaint, I was a child. I was like, nobody wants to be my friend. But the truth is, his feelings weren't all that unusual for a new SNL cast member. Far from it. If you saw our video about the brutal truth about joining Saturday Night Live, then you already know the audition process is, well, brutal. But as we also alluded to in that video, the audition is really just the beginning. Once you're on the show, you face a whole new competition over who gets their material on the air, and it's just as tough as the audition, if not tougher. As Amy Poehler explains in that same documentary, every week feels like you have to prove yourself again. Sketches get cut, they die on the table. Jokes don't make it. Yes, SNL does have a dedicated writing staff, but according to Sherry O'Terry, that staff isn't necessarily going to write material for any particular cast member. So performers have to be able to do it themselves if they want to get on the air, and no one's going to tell them how to do it either. Heck, even David Spade, who was literally hired as a writer rather than a performer, didn't actually know how to write a comedy sketch when he started there. Of course, figuring out what's truly funny can itself be fairly nerve-wracking. Davidson himself, for example, recalls the famous Farewell Mr. Bunting sketch, which killed on the air during his second season, made for a dry, unfunny table read. Add in the unrelenting pace of production and the pressure to keep the new material flowing, and it's enough to rattle the confidence of pretty much anyone.
Doink, doink. Doink, 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 doink.
Oh my god, the doink doink is amazing.
For example, future I Think You Can Leave star Tim Robinson was so overwhelmed by the process, he found himself being demoted from the cast to the writer's room after just one season. That was a fairly drastic case, but the pressure has affected even some of SNL's most iconic performers. Take Jason Sudeikis, who after writing and appearing in 2 wildly popular sketches during his first 2 weeks, didn't get another one on the air for months. In fact, things got so bad for him, he found himself calling home to tell his family that he was starting to think about leaving SNL and going back to Second City. Similarly, SNL superstar Bill Hader recalled, "The first 4 years at SNL, I was like, I'm gonna get fired at any moment." His anxiety over how he was doing got so bad, Michaels had to take him aside during a rehearsal and literally assure him that his job was safe and that it was okay to relax. The same goes for future 30 Rock star Tracy Morgan, who also needed reassurance from Michaels after he began to doubt whether he was genuinely funny. Bowen Yang had similar concerns, as did Bobby Moynihan, who, like Davidson, came to believe that everyone on the show hated him and that he might be fired any day. Jay Farrow was so shaken by the cutthroat nature of the production process, he would later say, "At first I had blind confidence, but then the sketches started getting pulled and it just started changing." And according to Beck Bennett, "I feel like those first 2 years I was just so stressed out, could not relax enough to think properly. It was always just reactive and just trying to survive a little bit." There are plenty more examples where that came from, but as Bennett suggested, hanging in and just trying to survive the first few years does seem to be the key. And that's not just our conclusion, or even Bennett's, it comes from Lorne Michaels himself. In fact, when Davidson asked him to be fired, Michaels' response was to tell him, "You don't figure it out until your 3rd or 4th year. It's just gonna suck for like 3 or 4 years." And according to Davidson, Michaels was right. Davidson stuck with it, and exactly as showrunner predicted, he got his act together after a few years. He would then go on to become one of the most iconic cast members of his era.
Hey, Miss Handler! I found a dead squirrel in your pool!
Finally departing for real in 2022. Those last few years would also find him starring in movies like Judd Apatow's The King of Staten Island, and since his departure from SNL, he's created and starred in the 2023 Peacock series Bupkis.
He just left, and it's not like his show was a hit.
I know, right? Like how you get Joe Pesci and Edie Falco and no viewers.
Made appearances in movies like 2023's Dumb Money and 2024's Riff Raff, and released the 2024 stand-up special Pete Davidson, Turbo Fonzarelli. And we're not even gonna get into all the Kardashian stuff, but none of it would have happened if he hadn't hung in at Saturday Night Live. The bottom line is that the first few years as an SNL cast member are, without a doubt, rough. But in the words of Beck Bennett, who also didn't really start getting comfortable as a performer until his 3rd or 4th year, after all that experience, your perspective changes a lot. Jason Sudeikis agrees, saying, "It's the show teaching you it's a marathon, not a sprint." As for Pete Davidson, far from feeling like he didn't belong and no one on the show liked him, he now sees Studio 8H as the place he grew up. In his own words, "I was like a kid when I came in, and I'll always be proud, I'll always be grateful, and I'll always miss it."
Well, how's this for good luck? You're walking down the street and you run into your dream date, and then someone hands you $40,000 and you have the time of your life.
That is Charles Rocket, and back in 1980, he was supposed to be the face of what NBC advertised as Saturday Night Live: The Next Generation. At the time, the now iconic sketch comedy series was headed into its 6th season, and it would be the first time the show ever had to completely rebuild itself, both in front of and behind the cameras. How did that go? Well, long story short, Saturday Night Live almost ended up dead. NBC's Saturday Night, the show that would become Saturday Night Live toward the end of its 2nd season, debuted in 1975. Known as the Not Ready for Primetime Players, the original cast included folks like Dan Aykroyd, John Belushi, Chevy Chase, Jane Curtin, Garrett Morris, Lorraine Newman, and Gilda Radner. Under the guidance of series creator and showrunner Lorne Michaels, SNL became known for its counterculture attitudes and pushing the limits of what was acceptable on television. As the series became more popular, however, so did its cast.
Here's your pea soup. Maybe now we can be friends, huh?
That's
what
right.
do you say?
As host of the popular Weekend Update, Chevy Chase in particular blew up quickly and left after just one season.
No problem.
In season 4, Aykroyd and Belushi would become the next major cast members to depart. They would be replaced with a flurry of new faces that included, among others, Aykroyd's brother, Peter Aykroyd, Bill Murray's brother, Brian Doyle Murray, and future Simpsons voice actor Harry Shearer. But although it's amusing to think about it now that the series is heading into its 50th season, people generally thought SNL's days were numbered. According to Michaels, at the end of season 5, he hoped to take the summer off, plus just a month or two of recovery time. That would give him a chance to recharge his creative batteries and NBC News a chance to cover the 1980 presidential election in SNL's time slot. But at some point, the notion of pursuing new opportunities in television and film production began to take hold, and he began to at least consider departing SNL permanently. Having made no final decision about his future with the show, Michaels advised NBC president Fred Silverman he might want to consider lining up a replacement for him. Michaels even recommended an ideal candidate for the gig who would be sure to keep the quality and tone of the series consistent: SNL writer-performer Al Franken. Michaels arranged for Silverman and Franken to meet on a Monday in May of 1980, and had that meeting taken place, it's likely we would all now have an opinion on the Franken era of SNL. Due to a late night, however, Silverman delayed the meeting by a week. That weekend, by an unfortunate coincidence, Franken appeared on the show in a sketch that had him personally mocking Silverman as a lame-o who rode around town in limousines while Franken had to hail cabs.
Why? Because Silverman is a lame-o. But he still gets limousine service. I like to call it a limo for the lame-o.
According to Michaels, Silverman concluded the sketch with a deliberate attack on him for canceling the meeting, became enraged, and canceled his rescheduled meeting with Franken. Michaels was so disillusioned by the whole experience, he finally made the decision to depart the show for what he then thought would be for good. Without any input from the show's departed creator, NBC selected Jean Doumanian to be the new executive producer of Saturday Night Live. Doumanian was one of SNL's associate producers, and she understood how the production worked behind the scenes. But she also wasn't a writer, having just a single writing credit to her name. Michaels would later kindly describe the pick as an interesting choice. To him, SNL was a writer-based show. He had worked as a comedy writer both before and during his time on the series, and he felt it took a writer to evaluate whether or not jokes and sketches were really funny. But for better or worse, Doumanian was in. With the rest of the not ready for primetime players and the cast members from season 5 leaving along with Michaels, Doumanian had to quickly assemble an all-new talent roster. Passing on future stars like Jim Carrey, Paul Rubens, and John Goodman, the rookie showrunner went with Denny Dillon, Gilbert Gottfried, Gail Mathias, Joe Piscopo, Ann Risley, and the aforementioned Charles Rocket. In an era where almost all white casts were embarrassingly still the norm, Doumanian was also determined to include just a single black comedian. That spot was almost filled by a stand-up comic named Charlie Barnett, or by some accounts, a young Robert Townsend. But talent coordinator Neil Levy had started receiving calls from a then unknown comic from Roosevelt, Long Island, named Eddie Murphy.
Yeah, walk out in the street and say, "Hey, how you doing? My name's Ed. What's yours?" "Oh, my name is Buckwheat, man. Nice to meet you." "Hey, Buckwheat. That's my name, Buckwheat." Right.
Murphy talked his way onto the show and would quickly be promoted to the main cast. But casting was only half of Doumanian's problem, because all but one of the writers also left with Michaels. The new writing staff was headed up by ex-Smothers Brothers Comedy Hour writer Mason Williams, but due to creative differences with Doumanian, he wound up departing after only 6 episodes. He would be replaced by Jeremy Stevens and Tom Moore, a duo who had written for the talk show parody Fernwood Tonight, but they didn't last either, and the writer's room would become something of a revolving door. All that might have been forgivable if the new show was good, but right from the start, it was a bomb. This era of the show would be criticized for its heavy use of sexual and racial humor, and for just generally being unfunny, sometimes pointedly so.
But it's not all laughs. You'll learn how to react to overt cuteness, too.
The production was equally chaotic behind the scenes. One poorly planned episode came up short time-wise, and the show was forced to rely on Murphy doing part of his stand-up routine as filler. And then there was the curious decision to briefly replace the wildly popular Weekend Update with a 3-segment news parody called Saturday Night Newsline. With the exception of the work being done by Murphy and Piscopo, the new SNL was a disaster, and the show hemorrhaged ratings, losing 30% of its audience. Then, on February 21st, 1981, Rocket would casually drop an F-bomb live on air.
"Charlie, how are you feeling now after you've been shot?"
"Oh man, it's the first time I've ever been shot in my life. I'd like to know who did it."
Despite SNL's rowdy reputation, the resulting bad publicity turned out to be something of a last straw for NBC, and Dumanian was fired after one more episode. NBC executive Dick Ebersol would quickly be named as her replacement. As one of the execs who had first approached Michaels about creating SNL, Ebersol had long been credited with a significant role in the show's development, but Franken himself would debunk that idea during his return to the series on a weekend update on the April 11th, 1981 episode, accusing Ebersol of merely stealing the credit. Whatever the truth, Ebersol immediately cleaned house, firing most of the cast. Then, at the end of the season, he would dismiss everyone who remained except Murphy and Piscopo, and that ending came sooner than anyone expected thanks to a writer's strike that cut the season short after its 13th episode. Interestingly, had the 14th episode happened, it would have been hosted by Al Franken. Ebersol would continue to preside over the show until 1985, and his casts included a few future stars like Julia Louis-Dreyfus and Jim Belushi, and his final year he added some already famous faces like Billy Crystal, Christopher Guest, Rich Hall, Martin Short, and Harry Shearer. But for the most part, Ebersol's casts have been largely forgotten, and by the time the series reached the end of its 10th season, NBC had lost faith in the production and canceled SNL. The decision, however, was extremely short-lived, and the network decided they would make at least one more go at it if, and only if, Lorne Michaels would return to produce. Michaels agreed, and season 11 would bring SNL's third big makeover. The new cast included names like Robert Downey Jr., Joan Cusack, Anthony Michael Hall, John Lovitz, Dennis Miller, and Nora Dunn. That sounds like a murderer's row of talent, but replicating the success of the original Not Ready for Primetime Players isn't easy, even for Lorne Michaels. Audiences didn't take to the new cast, and NBC put SNL back on the chopping block. It was only through a personal appeal from Michaels to executive Brandon Tartikoff that the show was allowed to continue past its season finale in 1986. The next season found much of the new cast dismissed and replaced with now iconic SNL stars like Dana Carvey, Phil Hartman, and Victoria Jackson. That iteration of the show was a hit, and that's basically when the series became the undying, ever-evolving television institution we know today. The real irony is that way back at the end of season 5, all Lorne Michaels really wanted was a short break. Due to a Screen Actors Guild strike, that season would wind up starting late anyway. So if he had just taken a vacation and come back, none of this would have ever happened. The original cast may have stayed a while longer, and the show might have run for a few more seasons. And maybe Michaels would have rebooted it, but maybe he would have moved on to those other opportunities anyway. There's an argument to be made that even though Saturday Night Live: The Next Generation turned out to be a train wreck, the idea the show was something that could be endlessly reborn might never have come along if the Dumanian and Ebersol eras never happened. And that ability to always be something new and fresh has turned out to be one of the show's saving graces again and again